Autumn Brown, a queer science fiction writer, a mother of dragons, and a healing justice facilitator for social movements, living in rural Minnesota.
And I'm Adrienne Marie Brown, author of Emergent Strategy, author of Pleasure Activism, and Arya Stark.
And this is How to Survive the End of the World.
Our podcast on learning from apocalypse with grace, rigor, and curiosity.
Well, we are here in our second attempt to record a debrief conversation about last night's episode of Game of Thrones. This show is about endings, and whoa, what a big deal, massive ending for so many millions of people watching the show. Adrienne and I attempted to record a debrief conversation last night in the immediate aftermath of watching the show. But we were maybe too excited and therefore found out the following morning that there were some like major technical problems with our recording. So we have decided to do it again because it's that important to us.
It's that important.
And now we've had, almost 24 hours to really digest both like last night's episode, the events of the finale, and also to kind of begin to situate how we feel about what happened and what didn't happen last night's episode. And so we're going to talk about it. Adrienne, do you want to give us a spoiler frame about what's about to happen?
I really do. So basically, by the time you're listening to this, it's going to be at least 24 hours after the show aired. And so I really feel like if we're talking about an epic series finale show in the age of the internet, then I don't want anyone to act like, oh, I'm going to come onto a show that is titled Being About Game of Thrones after the epic series finale and get spoily feelings about the fact we're going to talk about everything. And I had this moment earlier today because someone came on, they're like, where's the spoiler alert for life? And I'm just like, let them eat spoilers. Dracarys, the thing is done. Winter has come. You need to get your life together. Some shows, I also think this, some shows are meant to be watched together in real time. And I feel like that's how Game of Thrones has been presented to us since the very beginning. It's like, you need to be on board with what we're doing. We're experiencing
you
this together.
You need to get your people together, get your life together.
Exactly.
And make sure you have access to this when it drops.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel like there's going to be some brilliant, some thing that gets created that creates secret threads of the internet or something like that. Maybe we can already do that. Maybe that's what I'll do for next shows that I want to do this is just be here's the page where we can all go and it's a secret group so we can just talk about stuff in real time. Because to me, this is the kind of show where I want to be what the and I just want to know that all my people are out there what the right? Together.
Yeah. I ran into someone recently who was like, don't say anything. I'm still on season 5. And I was like, good luck.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's if you're that far behind, then the idea that you're gonna make it through the next year without knowing what happened, I think is good luck.
Well, and I feel like there's a certain kind of preciousness to the whole thing. I really feel and maybe we should tell people this, but we grew up with a father who, still to this day, fully expects to be able to record all sporting events and then watch them on his own time and move through the entire world, bars, restaurants, airports, everything, being very...
Not that he goes to bars.
He's never been to a bar in his life, but being very upset with anyone who might mess up his experience, the surprise of the game to him, right?
Right.
And I'm like, Dad. And we had an experience with him once where we were all going to go see the movie Anaconda, and I mentioned something here's the description of Anaconda. I was like, it's about a big snake. And he was like, spoilers. I was like, Dad, it's called Anaconda. Right? Like, so,
Right.
and I feel like Game of Thrones is like that. It's like the whole thing is like, we're battling for them thrones. And this is, you know,
thrones.
So this is where we are. So that's the spoiler framing for this is just, you know, also it's really good work. I don't think it's really spoilable. Like, enjoy it. Just get into it.
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
But for this show,
so we thought
it'll make sense to you much more if you've actually watched all the way through the whole thing, because we want to be able to talk in a nuanced way and not be explaining everything for you slow people.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to explain anything that we talk about. So we thought that for this conversation today, we would begin, you know, just by talking about the things that we're like grateful for about the way the season ended. Because obviously this last season of Game of Thrones has been like very complicated for all of us who are like massive fans of the books and of the show. You know, things really went in a different direction narratively than I think a lot of us expected them to. Yeah. And we'll get into a little bit of some thoughts and theories about why that is later. But we wanted to start by talking about the things that we like and that we're grateful for.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna go into the territory of things that we felt maybe, you know, surprised or disappointed by.
Critique.
And then we'll a little bit of critique, and then we're going to land with our hopes and dreams for the future of the Stark children and other people who survived.
The dreams.
So I just want to start off by saying, like, the main thing I felt really grateful for in last night's episode, which is that they gave Jon Snow his hairstyle back at the end. Like, you know, that like he like exit that prison cell and suddenly he's got his full body, gorgeous black locks all over the place again.
That's right.
And there's just something about, it's like, oh, he took off the armor, he put back on his, like, you know, my watch is ended cape and like put his
the night cape, the night
cape. his hair's all out, like, and I'm like,
Samson and Delilah to me too. There's an aspect of it that was like some way he, and I can't wait to get into the whole feminist analysis, but in some way he has been cowing his own power and holding himself back and like holding back what he knows is the truth, right? And then that you see him like, okay, I'm fully back to, I know nothing, but I am good. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, his hair is like a symbol of his power.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And it just reminded me of like, oh yeah, the first woman he ever loved was a wildling. Like this is a wild man in there, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I mean, fully, like, I think on the look, on the fashion tip, I was like really pleased by Sansa Stark's breastplate there at the end when she's being crowned queen. I was like, I was here for her look all season, like the chain across the breast and all the stuff. Like, I definitely feel like her fashion this season feels like a thread that many of us are potentially about to go follow over the next 10 years.
The breastplate thing, I was like, I didn't know I needed that. I think I do.
Yeah, I think there may need to be some revolutionary breastplate creations. And also just loved watching her get crowned Queen of the North. Like, that felt very satisfactory. Yes. And similarly, like, I really didn't see Bran getting crowned king coming. Like, that was like a major surprise to me. Yeah. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed seeing him then like show up a little bit later in like an outfit that had some color in it finally. Like, he had that blue, like, oh. Just very, he looked a little fancier, like a little less like covered in blankets. I don't know where you got
this, since the entire town has been burned down, but I'm glad that you were able to go shopping. I did feel, okay, we're going to get to like Bran as the king. The thing about Bran being the king that I'm down for is that it's a disabled king, right? That I love that, like, we end up with a king in a wheelchair and a king who doesn't want to be king, and a king who's not necessarily like one of these charismatic, hungry individuals who's been gunning for it, and also not sort of a typical heroic white man, because, you know, throughout this whole season, I was just like, just don't let it be a white man that ends up on this throne. But then I was like, oh, Bran, like, didn't see that coming. And I thought it was beautiful, the way he's like, why do you think I came all this way? Like, it's like,
he saw it coming. Of course he did.
He saw it. He's been watching. And like, then, you know, I felt gratitude for the complexity of what would have had to have been his journey in it. Like the choices he made of like, you know, because he let a lot of people die in the process, right? Like there was just a lot that was
Hodor.
Like, oh, I have to let Hodor and, you know, all of King's Landing, right? Like there was just a lot that had to play out, that he had to know, like all of this has to play out. But I was like, you know, having a visionary leader who's like, I don't want this. And now all the people who were the most dangerous people have kind of taken each other out. That I thought was a really interesting choice. I will say, I know this is not about the finale itself, but I do want to say the Battle of Winterfell to me in this season was a beautiful and I think a perfect episode for me. And I felt like as an organizing analogy episode, that was the one that I was like, I think people need to really pay attention to, because it was so much about everyone, all these people in this that ended up playing key roles in saving all of humanity in this fantasy world were people who had initially been like gunning for the power themselves or operating on someone else's behalf and had to be organized into being a part of this massive effort. And I was like, oh, that's something that organizers really need to see and understand. Like, and you'd have to watch it all up to that. And then I think that's what made the last 3 episodes for me so complex, because I was like, oh. And then we see people start splitting out again and turning on each other again after having come together in such a powerful way.
And what is it? I think Tyrion has an interesting line in there at some point, like after the Battle of Winterfell. I think he says something along those lines of like, well, now we've dealt with you know, the greatest threat to all of humanity. Now we just have to contend with each other. And it's like this interesting, like queuing up that like, yep. And we're not going to be able to do that well.
Spoiler alert. We don't. So there's another thing I love, that that moment when Sansa's uncle, I can't remember what his name is now. But
Edmund Tully.
Thank you. Edmund Tully. When Edmund Tully stands up and begins to give the kind of, I don't know, I felt like kind of Beto O'Rourkean, like, you know, I just could maybe it's me. Maybe I'm meant to. And she was just like, Uncle, please sit. And then like, so first of all, that's a new t-shirt. And then he bangs his sword, like literally bangs his sword against something, like his long, big phallic object against something on the way to sit down. I was just like, enjoyable. I'm enjoying this.
Exactly.
You know,
that was
and on a
fantastic.
meta level, I do like that ultimately the people that we were given at the very beginning of this arc as the good people, the Starks, who also happen to be like, who I felt like Black people mostly kind of aligned ourselves with as like those Starks, you know, that they're running
Dem
everything.
Starks.
Right? I was just like, Game of Thrones, Game of Blacks, Game of Starks, right? So so those are some of the things that I really found that I felt really grateful for.
Can I say something about
and did I mention Arya's throw? Did we talk about Arya's outfits?
Oh, you didn't yet, but talk about Arya's throw.
Arya
for
/ my fur throw that I thought was so fantastic. I love how it went. Like how I was just like, where did this come from? Like, because you know, time is so magical in a magical world, but it was epic. Are you putting on a throw? Wow. Okay, first of all, my listeners right now, because your listeners probably anticipated you doing this, I want you to know that Autumn just reached across to who knows where and pulled a magical throw over her body that looks like a fur throw. Why do you have my throw?
Let me explain this to you.
I need to understand why you're wearing my clothes.
In about an hour and a half, I'm about to be hosting a webcast on behalf of Aorta, debriefing the Game of Thrones finale with some other like brilliant nerdy people. And I have been like experimenting with my costume for the evening. And so I have this amazing fur throw. I think I'm going to like pull together a Jon Snow look. I haven't decided exactly how far I'm going to go, but this is part of it.
I just want to suggest that if there are baking sheets in that house, then you could grab a baking sheet and strap it to your body and get the best plate. And I don't think it's too far.
It's not too far. I just need some duct tape. But please go ahead. Talk about Arya's throw.
Wait. So Arya's throw was incredible. And just her look was incredible. And I really felt like, I felt really grateful that like the killing that she needed to do, like whatever she needed to do to avenge the harms that had been done to her, it felt like a period was put on that storyline. And I feel grateful for that like we weren't having to watch her continuously it's like, I went to kill Cersei, she's done, like the Hound, everybody, okay, cool, like I guess it's just me here, and I felt some freedom possible for her after years of like responding to nonstop trauma and trying to just fight back. It felt like suddenly, what is her life going to be like if she's not fighting back against other people? But I think there's some complex stuff to get into about where is she actually going.
So this is an actual, like, feels like a good transition into like the sort of disappointments and surprises.
One thing before that pivot, I just want to say I was grateful to see the direwolf come back and actually get pet. I was so pissed last time when Jon Snow just like looked at the direwolf and was like, peace. And I was like, wait, this direwolf survived some zombies and you can't even like go like rub him on the ear? Oh,
like look at his ear. Okay. Just give him a hug.
Exactly. So, but now pivot to disappointment.
So just on that Arya tip, that like one of the things that I found, I haven't decided if this is more in the surprise or more in the disappointment category. But one of the things that I did find really surprising is that we didn't get to see Arya don a mask this season as a part of her, like, I'm a masterful assassin person. And I felt like they were really, I mean, it felt, it's on purpose, right? They really teed us up to think that she was going to be responsible.
I thought she was going to take on?
I thought she was going to be the person responsible for killing Dany.
I thought she was going to do both Cersei and Dany. I thought she was going to take on Jaime's face and kill Cersei, and then I thought she was going to take on Grey Worm's face. Like I thought maybe that was her as Grey Worm in the last scene, and then they showed us her, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe I can imagine the showrunners sort of making the call that like either of those decisions would have felt too obvious or too easy or whatever to the audience, but regardless, it was sort of interesting to be like, I mean, obviously it was awesome to watch her make the badass move of killing the Night King at the end of the Battle of Winterfell.
Exactly.
Even though
very satisfied.
Even though there were like, so for me, there felt like there were so many plot holes over the course of that entire episode that made it sort of feel like, okay, what is going on with Bran under the tree? Why is he just like flying around with crows in the air? I don't understand. But anyway,
because my whole thing with Bran, I mean, I'll say this: I do feel like, I think what you've just said about the plot holes, like to me, that's the issue with season 8, right?
Yep.
Because I'm like, I don't understand. And I don't know if I ever will understand, because it seems like the show creators don't ever want to tell us this. But I'm like, I don't understand why for something so epic and so massive, where every other season has been 8 episodes or more, that you wouldn't just give us a strong 8-episode closing season, or possibly even a 10-episode season. Like there's just so many different storylines, and there were so many beautiful interactions between people that I think needed more space, needed more time. And so I felt the same thing, where I was like, I can intuit, or I can kind of not to intuit, I mean, I can deduce that like, because Bran has some connection with the Night King, some psychic connection that he has with all existence, apparently, that there's a way that, him being the bait that is going to pull the Night King over into a space of vulnerability. Like I get all that, right? I understand. I can deduce that the crows are one of the ways he goes out. He sends out the message, and the Night King's like, oh, okay, that's where you are. Bet, right?
I'm coming there.
But I'm like, I'm having to figure this out, and I'm smart. But I also am like, I shouldn't be working quite this hard for how much y'all have paid to create these very excellent shows. Like, just make it a little bit more clear.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was a lot of errors, obviously, over the course of this season, which I'm excited for us to get into. But there was, as you were talking earlier about how much you love the Battle of Winterfell episode, I will say too that like one of the things that I really appreciated in that episode is not only like witnessing the way various characters really play their position in order to participate in this collective defeat of the armies of the dead and the Night King himself, but also the ways that like each of these, particularly the characters who were on very individualistic journeys, find their journeys end in collective service.
Exactly.
And I mean, Theon being like the perfect example of that like his entire journey over the course of the whole series is a very individualistic journey that's very much about like descending into darkness and then trying to find redemption and all these things. But even Arya's journey as well, because Arya is also a character who's on a very individualistic journey, and her whole orientation to like mastering the skill of assassination is very much, she's doing that very much because she wants to seek revenge against people who have harmed her and her family, not because she's necessarily interested in like the broader conditions or changing the broader conditions or the broader institutions that are influencing the society itself, right? And yet that skill that she hones very carefully over years still ends up in the service of collective good. And like that was one of the things that I really appreciated about that episode.
Same thing. I mean, I felt the same way about Melisandre, which is like that thing of just showing up and being like, okay, like y'all don't even understand the shit that I'm doing. Like I'm serving this whole other god. Like y'all are not even on this. And then showing up and being like, but I will light up all the
set your fours on fire.
I will come out and actually get scared myself. You know, like, I mean, there were just moments like that where she was just like, you know, this I guess is what I'm supposed to do, is come here mostly to remind Arya about her purpose, right? And I just felt like those kind of moments were very interesting to me, and were giving me so much hope about the capacity of the show to hold the complexity of powerful women, particularly like moments like that where she's like, listen, honey, remember how I gave you a little bit of prophecy before? Like, this is that moment. Like, you know, or Arya telling Sansa, like, here's what you do with something, you know, here's how you protect yourself. Or like just these moments of like, Sansa, I recognize you're the smartest woman in Westeros, and also you don't know how to fight. I do. Here's what you need to do. Like those kind of moments were so powerful. So that was part of why I felt the disappointment I felt when it felt like, okay, and then they came up to like the edge of knowing how to write complex women. And I want to say, like, I really, seriously, I wish they had the cojones to have Dany just fly over, burn Cersei's face off, and then have to get in right relationship with Arya and Sansa. I still think they could have burnt the Iron Throne. I think it would have been powerful and possible to have those women actually run things and have Bran as like their spiritual advisor. Like that to me would have made a lot of sense as a way that this all ended, that still protected the dignity of someone like Daenerys, who has been traumatized since the moment she came onto the screen. Like that's what her character has been the woman who was sold, the woman who was raped, the woman who was betrayed, the woman who was abandoned, the woman who was left, the woman who turns out to be the aunt of the only man she ever loved, or the second man she ever loved. Like it's,
and all of her children die.
All of her children are being attacked, dying. Her best friend has just been beheaded in front of her by someone that she showed up, you know, to parlay with. Like the whole thing is just like, you know, she had to watch her baby shot out of the sky. I mean, like there's so many reasons why this woman would be like, no, fuck all of you. Like literally no human except for one that's dead and like my dragon, you know, whoever I feel, you know, I feel like she feels her dragons as like a human beyond human connection, right? So I'm like, no one else has had my back. Like no one else has had my back, but y'all want me to have the back of your whole species? Like, no, you know, like to me, there was so much that made sense about her rage, but then the way they played it out, that it was like, when a woman is that angry, the only option is madness. And so the only thing she can do is genocide. And I'm like, no, that's what a man would have done in those circumstances. I'm not convinced that that was the only option for what she could have done in those circumstances. So that felt like the biggest disappointment to me, that led into then this finale where I was like, yeah, someone has to take her out now. Having done that, she cannot live. Like we can't have her live. But I do say the moment when she comes out the first time with the dragon wings opening up behind her, that was, I was like, girl, you know,
I mean, her outfit also total fire. You know what I'm saying? Like the fashion, like, you know, even inside of all of the mass murder scenes, the fashion of this whole last 2 episodes is like amazing. Yeah. I can't believe I said that out loud. But yeah, well,
I mean, that's why we watch fantasy shows. So occasionally we can have thoughts and feelings like that and then just keep it moving.
I have to say, yeah, I just today read this article that was published a few days ago in the Scientific American called "The Real Reason Game of Thrones Fans Hate the Final Season." Ooh. And it's
because we're just disappointed it's ending, or what?
Well, no, but it's actually an excellent article because it basically points out that like the big shift that happens in the series, which happens at the point where the series gets ahead of the books.
Yes.
And is basically in the hands of these Hollywood writers. Exactly. Is that the show shifts from telling a sociological story in which the character arcs and choices are heavily influenced by the institutions and conditions, to being a psychological story where the character arcs and choices are driven by internal motivations of the lead characters.
Ooh,
and that like
that's good.
And that like that shift happens basically because American TV writers don't know how to write stories that are sociological. That's right. Like the typical way that a TV writer writes is like inside the head of the lead characters. And interestingly, the person who wrote this article made the point that like one of the ways that we know that narrative shift happens is that they stop killing off the characters that we care about most right away, right?
Exactly.
Whereas like a story that follows like a story that's being told through a sociological lens can easily get away with killing off characters that we love without missing a beat in the story, because that's not what the story is actually about. So that
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So anyway, so it was really interesting to me to see that article after having all these feelings about like what they did with Danny's character, because I'm like, yeah, like, you know, there is this interesting thing that's happening, obviously, over the course of the whole last season, which is like Cersei and Dany are beginning to mirror each other more and more as powerful women in leadership who are walking with and carrying all of this extraordinary like trauma and brutality. And Cersei is like motivated primarily by the desire to like protect her family, and then like gets really twisted inside of that. And then like Dany is motivated by this like liberation ideology, but then fails to see the ways that she's like actually reenacting tyranny through even inside of her like revolutionary ideology. And like you see them bringing these characters closer and closer into like a mirror relationship with each other. And then it feels like the possibility to deal with that in a complex way just like falls off the edge of the earth.
They didn't have it. Well, because I mean, I'm thinking about those quotes, right? Like even in the last episode, you know, Daenerys comes out and she says, "The world we need won't be built by men loyal to the world we have. It's not easy to see something you've never seen before." And like all of that, I'm like, that is a revolutionary thing to say. Like it's a revolutionary text. And then she immediately follows it when Jon is like, "Okay, but like, what about the people?" And he's like, "They don't have a choice." She says, "They don't have a choice." And I'm like, those two things literally don't go together, right? Like, but that's the thing. And that's where I was like, oh, she's kind of like Killmonger, right? She's kind of like Israel, right? Like there's this way that it's like, we are going to create something that is, you know, after having all this trauma, we're going to create something that we think will make us safe. And then that'll be, you know, like, it's just like, that's not how it works. Like, absolute power cannot be a safety mechanism for anyone. But I'm really sad that they did do that mirroring of Cersei, Dany, and then having all these like sort of broken white men, you know, Tyrion and Jon all looking at each other like, you know, I mean, Jon literally at the end, to me, looks like someone who's like, I'm in a relationship with this very abusive person, and like, poor me, I cannot figure out how to do this. And I'm just like, so you end the show with all of these white men who seem to be embodying goodness, embodying reason, embodying like the bigger man, you know, like I'm the bigger person.
Oh, poor them. They've been victimized by the women in their lives.
Exactly. And the women are left to look like either evil or completely insane, or even at their best. Like, you know, I think Sansa gets kind of the best look, and it's still like master manipulator, master strategist, like, you know, not just like straight up like also good, right? Like, because to me, Sansa is like that G. You know, Sansa is like,
she is that
I
G.
am just committed to place-based organizing and place-based leadership. I like to be responsible and accountable to my own people who I'm in relationship with and have been in relationship with.
She's the grassroots rural
forever.
Organizer.
She is. I saw. Okay, so that meme, this set of memes that I think is the Poor People's Campaign, like Utah Poor People's Campaign, put it together, and it's so good. Like I keep being like, oh, what images do we need to put? We might need to put all of those images as like the images for this show.
So good.
But I feel like she's not just the rural, like she almost feels like an indigenous rural organizer, right? Like she's very much like, it's about these people who belong to this place and know this place and understand this place. We are loyal to this place. And you guys are playing this game that tries to pretend like all these kingdoms can be held under one throne, which doesn't even make sense to me. Like we just need to operate on our own.
Right.
And I thought that moment was to me, that was such a powerful moment, and kind of the only way I could say you can get away with having Bran as the king and not Sansa, because I'm like, Sansa's the most strategic person here. Right. But she don't want it. Right.
Right. She's like, I'm just going to stay up here with my people. Yeah, it did. And, you know, and it was an easy acceptance for Bran, and I loved it.
Oh, yeah. Bran was just like, I can't believe I'm going to do this anyway. Like, no, I don't even know how to talk to people. Like, that was the other part that's so funny to me. It's like, he literally has just stared into space and not been able to communicate for all of it. And all of a sudden he's like, actually quite coherent. Boss bitch, like in the house, ready to do that. Like I was just like, oh,
although I love also the final scene where he like meets with his high council, and it's like, oh, you know what? The best thing that I can do right now is go off in a room by myself and see if I can warg into Drogon.
He's like, I'm just gonna see if I can find Drogon.
Y'all can figure out the money piece.
And you know, that felt like kind of a surprise to me as a possibility, was like having someone who ends up in leadership who has like these mythical powers, and that they're not mythical powers of violence, right? Which was like Dany's relationship with the dragons was like, okay, the mythical power that you have, you don't know how to fight or protect yourself, but you do have this dragon, and like you have this tie with this dragon, and
you have a super weapon,
right?
Yes,
I think that's what you were talking about, that as like a nuclear power, right? Like
right. Like, so this was this interesting thing I was thinking about last night, and that like because I've been thinking about like, what does this show have to say about like how power corrupts, and thinking about Dany particularly as this like leader who understands herself to be visionary, understands herself to be a revolutionary, speaks the language of revolution and liberation, but also has this super weapon that no one else has access to, and so she's capable of like a destruction on a scale that no one else can create. And so there's a way that her character arc for me also really feels like the best read on U.S. politics, because U.S. global politics, because like the U.S. government similarly speaks the language of democracy, sees itself as a shining city on a hill, sees itself as like telegraphing democratic ideals all over the globe. Meanwhile, it's capable of and acts regularly on a capacity for destruction, extraction, imperialism, colonialism that no one else, like no other power, is capable of acting on quite in the way that we are able to. And
I feel like that's the thing. It's like privilege, right? Like to me, this is the essence of privilege. Is like when people are like, I see myself as a victim. I only see myself as a victim. If anything bad happens to me, it's white tears or whatever it is, right? It's like I can only see that. But actually, I'm the most powerful person in the room. And
it's actually just entitlement.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like that's the whole thing, deep. Right? Tyrion and Varys keep having conversations about this over the course of the whole series of like, they recognize that that part of the problem with Dany is that she believes herself to have this destiny. She believes that she was born to do this. And so it's like, so she feels entitled to destroy if she has to in order to get her needs met.
Although here's a place where, and I might be stretching, I might be reaching, but what the fuck, right? So we're the show writers. But I feel like there's a certain parallel for me with like Beyonce and capitalism and Daenerys and power in this. So
okay, this is go ahead. I'm gonna follow you out on this.
I want you to follow me out onto the limb, and then just let me. If I'm wrong.
I'll let you fall by yourself, though.
Treat me like Tyrion. Exactly. Be like, bitch, now you need to be the hand. But I feel like, so capitalism exists. Beyonce comes along. She's like, I'm literally the best at what I've ever, I'm here to slay. I'm here to be the best. I'm here to be the queen. I'm here to like give you everything I've got. And then people get pissed at her because she's also like financially successful inside of all that. Right. And it's like, she's a Black genius Olympic athlete kind of performer. We don't have anyone else who's doing that at all. But so for me, I'm just like, don't be mad at her for besting the game. She didn't create the game. She was born into this game that we're all born into, and we're all playing it at different degrees, because except for, the few people who are like, I'm living off the grid with $0, right? I'm like, the majority of everyone else is in some way playing this game, but then getting mad at her for like excelling in it. And I felt a little bit like that with Daenerys, where I was like, she didn't create this game. She didn't build this throne. She didn't engaged in most of the situation, right? She was just like, I was born and immediately sold into a situation that I had to figure out, how do I survive? Then when every single time I have found any kind of safety or stability, it has been swept away from me. And so finally I figured out a way to accumulate some power, and I want to use my power to make sure that other people don't get stuck in this situation. And then it all gets twisted, right? But I'm like, she didn't create the throne. And I feel like there's this way that's like, she gets so punished and she gets treated like, an insane person for basically doing the same thing that almost every other person who's aiming for power was doing or would have done if they had had a dragon. Like if Cersei had a dragon, she would have been flying around burning everything up a long time ago without half of the things that were happening, right?
I think this is a really interesting analogy, and I think
I'm glad you're not just letting me fall off.
Yeah, I'm not going to let you fall by yourself because you're my sister, and I don't want to feel responsible for your death.
You're like, let's all fall together.
Okay. But I think the thing that complicates it, right, is going back to the privilege and entitlement analogy for Dany, because then it's like if you're looking at it through that lens, then you can see how she still has a responsibility to be in right relationship with what she did come into the world with access to, right? And so right, all these, it's like the white working class. It's like all these bad things did happen to her. Yes. And it's also she still had those dragons.
That. No, I see. I mean, she didn't come into the world, like she didn't come in with the dragons though. It's not
but they were just like, gifted to her at her wedding, and then she was just like, let me burn some shit up. The thing I think she came in with was being a part of a bloodline that was in line for the Iron Throne, right? Right.
To me, like the dragons that she, being given dragon eggs, I don't think that would have mattered if she wasn't one of the Targaryens who happened to have that magical connection to the dragons, right? Because any other bitch got those dragon eggs, she'd be like, I got some dragon eggs. Beyonce literally has some dragon eggs. It's like whatever, right?
Beyonce,
I mean, not literally, because dragons aren't real, but like Jay-Z bought her some kind of dragon egg type thing, right? So, but she's not a Targaryen. I mean, that's partnership. He's like, look, let me back in the lot, like let me back in your love, right? So you got to really go far. But I do feel like that piece, to me, that piece is the most intriguing piece of it, is like at the end of the day, even with everything she went through, she was born with this privilege, right? And so having been born with that privilege, and then to come up into this situation where it's like, okay, and this I feel like was one of the biggest surprises to me, is that it's like, oh, but Jon actually is in line right ahead of you. And the fact that she was like, I love you, but I won't, it didn't ever like really land for them that like partnership might be possible here. Like we're the two people who are in line for this throne, and we're super in love with each other. Like, why can't this just be a thing? And that's another thing that I thought was a real plot hole to me in these last episodes, was like, they're having this beef, and I'm like, why not just like, and I couldn't tell if it was like, once he got the auntie news, I felt like they played this really mysteriously when it could have been much more clear. Was like he turned off by that, or just like, I can't tell what to do, or it's like wrong, or like what's happening, right? Because she was just sort of like inconvenient, but you're my boo, right? We didn't grow up knowing this shit. Like, let's just keep it moving. And he's like, I don't know what to do. And like, he felt like he went into very, I'm not going to call out any particular astrology, but he felt like he got into a very confused zone, right? Where he was like,
you're like, I'm not going to call out any particular sign.
I'm not going to say.
And we already know from earlier seasons that like Jon Snow is dealing with some like sexual repression stuff anyway.
Seriously.
And so like it did feel like a little bit like, oh, there's something more complex going on here in terms of like, you know, in the context of this medieval ass fantasy show with all these siblings and cousins fucking each other, like, you can't figure out how to make this work.
Well, exactly. I was like, in y'all's context, I'm really curious about this, right? And like the fact that
I mean, I shouldn't be arguing for this, but like it did feel sort of like, what?
Just
why?
Like, it's not right. I think it's the thing that's interesting to me is like it's not right even in that world. Like people, you know, people judge Cersei and Jaime, but Jaime's still like, but we still doing it, right? You know, like I just think it's interesting that Jon is like, I think that there's something. I think that what could have been explored with a little bit more time is that what's happening is Jon is actually traumatized by this reality. Like that's like I have fallen in love with someone and I feel actually traumatized by this being what's happening. And I still totally love this person, but this is also my aunt. And this is all, like, where are the power dynamics of this? Because we're the same age. Like, what are the power dynamics that are going on? This is very confusing. And I really thought that could have used a lot more space. I think we're
again with the fact that there should have been like 10 episodes instead of 6. Hello.
Exactly. I was like, there was room. But I think this is transitioning us now into kind of like, what were the surprises? Because that to me was a big surprise, that at no point there wasn't just a let's have that conversation or let's have that fight, right? It's just like, you know, for her, because I feel like at the end she was like, come still be my loyal subject while we go like burn down the whole world, right?
Right.
And I feel like instead it would have been interesting to be like, we are peers. Like, let's be peers, right? And that it was like, does she just not see him that way? Or, you know, because he's like, I don't want the throne, but I don't know what I do want. You know, it just felt like I just want peace. I just want chill. Like his purpose felt so much clearer when it was like against the Night King.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the fact that like part of the arc of his character involves him losing a sense of purpose after the Night King is defeated. And then his only purpose becomes like following Dany, and like that, like that's actually not enough of a purpose for any one person. Exactly. And actually that feels like a sort of like underlying question, I think, of the entire series, that like for which characters does it feel like enough of a purpose to be following someone, and for which characters is it not? And there's some really interesting racialization, I think, there in terms of which characters can get away with.
That was where the deepest race stuff came into this, because I was like, okay, so
like it's enough for Grey Worm and Melis and Missandei to basically exist primarily to serve Dany, whereas like all of these other characters,
folks, right? Like all the Dothraki, all the Unsullied, they're all like, okay, we are lockstepping for this queen, and
even though we're in a foreign land that has nothing to do with us.
Exactly.
But then you have all these. But then you have all these white characters who are like, who are in theory supposed to, for all sets of reasons that have to do with loyalties to her family, should be even more loyal to her, and yet are constantly questioning whether or not they should actually be serving her, basically because she's a woman.
Yes. Well, and I think there's something I think this is the thing that has happened for the entire show, right? Which I feel like has been a critique that I've heard throughout the entire time, and I felt the entire time, which is like having this white-haired white queen be the one who's like freeing all the slaves and has these magical powers is like, it's concerning, right? It's like, what would it have looked like to have Missandei, you know, actually be the one who has all these powers and is the like, you know, half black child of one of these people, you know, like I'm just like, there's ways that could have been played, and it would have been really good, really fascinating, really interesting. Although I love Khaleesi, like I'm never gonna actually give up Team Khaleesi. I'm just gonna be like, I think they miswrote Khaleesi, and I'm just gonna wait for George R.R. Martin to come back and correct it. But in the surprise realm, I felt really surprised by the number of Dothraki and Unsullied that suddenly showed up in that square at the end, where I was like, as far as I remember, now I might not have it all together because I was emotional, but I feel like by the White Walkers, with their literal flames going, went driving against the White Walkers, and like 4 came back with 1 horse, and then all of a sudden they were just there with like basically the entire. It seemed like all the Dothraki that ever existed were back in there just chilling and partying. And then the same with the Unsullied. Like I was like, the number of Unsullied that we've ever seen at their max amount, it felt like maybe like 8/9 of that was in that square. But I'm like, but I remember the Battle of Winterfell. And I just remember it going a little differently. So I was very surprised by how they just kept playing with the numbers like we don't have brains and pay attention and like we don't rewind.
You know what it felt like to me? was a plot hole that they allowed for because they realized that what they were up to with the Battle of Winterfell was some racial shit where they put all the people of color on the front lines, and it felt like they just tried to correct for it by being like, actually, all them are still alive. That's what happened.
That's right. So I felt like that was a big surprise. I felt like it was a huge surprise that they didn't kill Jon immediately whenever who found. Are you okay? What the fuck? Did you just get overwhelmed?
I just got overwhelmed. I was trying to stretch my leg and I kicked my own headphones out of my ears.
Okay, good. Because it looked like you got really...
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back.
So the other thing that really shocked me was that they let Jon live. Like that Jon was still alive, when Grey Worm or again, plot hole. I'm like, that would have been a great scene to see, or like that would have been great to just understand like what happened there. Did Jon just because Jon just like many times would just sit there like, okay, dragon, like what you gonna do? But as far as I understand, so this is another thing that I'm like, why didn't this ever get tested or shown? If Daenerys and the Night King are the other two people who can ride a dragon and they're not burnable, then why in the Battle of Winterfell was Jon like ducking the fire every 5 seconds, and then in this standing there, like it just felt like, because I was like, Jon can't be burnt if he's actual dragon people. He's all good.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, I think the thing that was established with the death of Viserys in the very first season is that being a Targaryen doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be burned. And so there's no way to know for sure. Like we can't know, and we wouldn't know until someone tried to set Jon on fire. We just can't know whether he can't be burned. We can suspect that he probably
try to
can't
burn his finger and just see what happens. That's what I would do. We can suspect
it based on the fact that he had already been brought back from the dead once, that he probably also has some magical powers, but it never gets confirmed.
Well, I thought that that's what happened. Like I was really pleased with Drogon just being like, okay, listen, human beings, I'm not fucking with y'all no more, and nobody's going to get this throne at all.
And I'm taking her body with me.
Lava. And I just want to say that your brilliant child understood Game of Thrones, and I just need you to take everybody down this journey.
Okay, this is so amazing. People who don't follow me on Facebook, which is most people, wouldn't know this.
Because wouldn't know this
because you don't know me like that. But wouldn't know this. But the just an hour or so before the show started, I posted on Facebook about this conversation I had with Finn a couple of days ago. Finn has never watched Game of Thrones, but knows about it just because he lives in the world. And he was asking me who I was predicting would end up on the Iron Throne, and I was sharing with him my predictions. And then he was like, I don't think anyone's going to sit on the Iron Throne because I think it's going to get broken. And I was like, that's so interesting, Finn. Yes. You're the first person I've heard predict that. And then what the fuck happens? The throne actually gets melted to the goddamn ground. And I was so just like, my child is a genius. Yes. Genius child.
So smart. And it's so smart because he plays all those games where it's all about strategy. Like he thinks about strategy all the time. But I was like,
exactly.
I'm
just like, brilliant. Yeah, that is actually the most strategic thing if we want to actually liberate people. So the other thing that I wanted to name especially related to this scene with Jon where he kills Dany and then doesn't get burned up by the dragon. One of the things that I thought was kind of surprising is that, there's this other thread in the stories about this other prophecy about the prince who was promised. And a lot of people were predicting that Jon was going to fulfill this prophecy because the prophecy says that the prince who was promised will come into power by driving a sword or a knife or something into the heart of his beloved. And that's exactly what he does, right? He drives a sword or a knife into Dany's heart. And so it was interesting and surprising to me that that happens, but then the show makes the choice that he then doesn't end up on the throne. He then doesn't end up holding a seat of power, right? Because another way that whole scene could have gone is that Drogon then attempts to burn him alive, can't, and then Jon climbs on Drogon's back and then becomes the Dragon King or whatever the fuck, right?
Which may have been the original ending because, the whole thing is that they said they had some ending and it got leaked or got discovered, and so then they changed it, which a lot of people feel is why we have this version. But
That's really interesting. And, you know, and obviously like that would have been an easy ending and in some ways also a lot less satisfying because we would have ended up with a white man who didn't really know what he was doing on the throne. Right. And so because this is my whole thing about Jon Snow, the whole season 8 is that like everyone's trying to make the argument that like he would actually be the better leader based on no evidence whatsoever. It's like just because you know how to lead people into battle doesn't mean that you are necessarily cut out to be like the ruler of like whatever the 6 or 7 kingdoms. No, you know, I don't even know
like, well, he doesn't want it, and that makes for a good person. I'm like, not necessarily. And I say this as someone who's also like, I never want to be in charge of anything, and that's because that's not my leadership quality. Like, I'm like, exactly. I know great leaders. I support them to be great leaders. I don't do that, right? I'm like, and I think I love that
there is an element of wanting it that does help.
Yes, right. Well, there's an element of wanting it that also sometimes leads you to prepare for it. And I feel like with Jon, even like his like, you know, going into battle, like I'm like, he's not necessarily been a great leader of others into battle. Like he just is magically like, I will come through, right? Like he's tireless when it comes to, you know, he's basically got stamina. He's a great lover, right? Not a fighter, right? Anyway, so I think the other thing that was a big surprise to me was all those people showing up all of a sudden there. That it was like, okay, so Sansa, Arya, Bran, Aemon, you know, the Iron Throne folks. Like it's basically like all of a sudden everybody's just like, hey.
The Iron Island folks, yeah.
Iron Island. Oh yeah, sorry, Iron Island folks. It was like, what up, though? Like we're here now. And so once again, it was like the magical thing of like, how does time work in Game of Thrones? How do people travel? Like, how did they even get the message that it was like, all right, King's Landing had been burnt the fuck up. Everybody dead. Come on through. We're gonna talk about this power shit, right? It just felt like I was really surprised. I was like, wait, I don't think we earned getting to this council. I don't know why we're in the middle of this location right now.
And I was
and
like,
then having Tyrion come out, where I was just like, okay, Tyrion, who, you know, Tyrion is the transformative justice character of this show. I think like he's the one who's like has been wronged, has done wrong, you know, has said, look, I've done wrong. Hold me accountable. I'm ready to be, you know, killed in whatever way. And then they're like, no, you're going to actually be in service to the community. You're going to be in service to humanity for the rest of your life. And it's not necessarily going to be enjoyable. But I really liked the laughter at the suggestion of democracy. That was one of my favorite moments of the show.
That was really funny. And I have to say, in terms of the time scale problem of the show, which has, I think, been a problem all along, it was really funny because I was like, the only indicator they gave us for how much time has passed was how much Tyrion's beard had grown out. But like, it hadn't even grown out that much. So it's sort of like, that could be 2 days or 2 weeks. I don't know.
Exactly. Well, and I have to say, as someone who, I don't pay that much attention to beard scheduling, it didn't land. I didn't pick up on that as like a time has passed indicator. I was just like, he looks kind of scruffy, you know, doesn't he always look a little scruffy? But yeah, so I feel like that to me, I also want to say just a brief thing, the surprise of like, I kind of thought there was a chance that Cersei and Jaime weren't actually dead, or that like Jaime had somehow blocked Cersei. I don't know. I just was like, I'm not totally convinced that they're actually gone. And I thought the surprise of like just him going down there and the surprise of his emotion, you know, there was so much love and so much tenderness and so much real grief in there that I was like, you know, I think you spoke about this maybe last night, but it was just like the beauty of his acting, of what Peter Dinklage brought to the table was just beautiful. I mean, he was just incredible and deep and complex and like steady. Yeah.
And this is sort of segueing us into like hopes, but like I have to say, to me, one of the greatest gifts of this series is the rising star of Peter Dinklage, who I think many people have argued, and I think correctly, that like it is basically his acting prowess that carried this entire last season when a lot of other things weren't working, but he delivered some like stunning performances. I think that in the final episode, they really overly relied on him and gave him like too many monologues. It was like by the 5th monologue, it was sort of like, why are we still making him monologue at everyone? Like, it's not fair to Peter.
We don't need to make him monologue. He's been busted up.
He's been carrying y'all all season. But I do think that like his performances were just so consistent, beginning to end, so powerful. I can't wait to see what else he does as an actor. Like, he is just So
and
incredible.
I felt so much hope in that last episode that he's a Virgo, because that moment when he got up and straightened the chairs and was just sort of like, here's how the table
Virgo
needs
moment.
to look, it just made my heart warm. I want to say a few other hopes I have. I really hope that Brienne goes back and adds herself to that Book of Nights and like her story, and isn't just like a heartbroken woman writing the history of like her fuckboy. I really want her to go back and like tell her incredible story.
Yeah. First woman knighted ever. Rises
like,
to the top to become the head of the Kingsguard. Hello.
Exactly. That's a big deal. So I feel hopeful about that. I feel hopeful that when they rebuild the castle, it's going to be wheelchair accessible for Bran and for all people who need wheelchairs.
Yes.
I feel really hopeful about Arya's line, that it feels like she's able to get free and go like, whatever y'all are up to here, I want to go beyond that. And it's interesting because in the last 24 hours, I've seen people like, no, she's going off to Columbus. She's going off to be colonial. And I was like, I totally did not read it that way, because she's so not interested in having power over others. And like, that's never something she's expressed as like, I want to rule or control or any of that. Like, she's just like, I don't know what's out there. I'm interested. So I didn't read it that way.
I've seen all of this and I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah. She's just like, all y'all fighting over everything. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. So I hope that my read is actually correct, and that we get some like Adventures of Arya that kind of feels like, you know, Ursula Le Guin wrote it, right? Like, I would be down for that kind of thing. And then I think my last hope was just, there's a way for me that this entire show, especially once we saw the North, once we saw the Wall, and we understood the winter was coming, that whole piece, I felt like there's been a big climate catastrophe analysis for me in all of it. That was just sort of like, there's something we humans have to all organize ourselves around that's bigger than us. And that little touch of green in the snow as Jon and the wildlings all head north, that made me feel a hopefulness, that it was like, okay, like winter came, we somehow survived it, like the worst of it, and like we came together in the ways that we needed to, and there's a future.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. What a good note to end on. Oh my gosh. I'm so sad that the series is over.
Me too.
I'm considering whether or not it's going to mean that I have to change the way I introduce myself in the opening credits of our show. I'm going to give myself a year to decide whether or not I need to self-identify as anything other than a mother of dragons.
Well, and I think just like keep paying attention to whether your children continue to be dragonish, because right now they really are.
Right. It's like, you know, also hashtag Khaleesi forever. Thanks for listening to our show. We're on Twitter and Instagram at End of the World PC. We're also on Facebook at End of the World Show.
If you would like to support all the heavy lift labor that we put into getting the show out to y'all, you can become a monthly sustainer at patreon.com/End of the World Show.
God, it is a heavy lift with this microphone in my hand.
Literally,
another helpful thing you can do, it's holding so much. Another helpful thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is to write us a review on Apple Podcasts if you are an iPhone person. You can also write reviews in other places. I just don't know where they are, but thank you for doing that.
This show, How to Survive the End of the World, is edited and produced by the Hodor of our movement, Zach Rosen.
Music for today's show is brought to you by Toondale, Run, and Mother Cyber.
And us, because this time I think our Marvel comic thing should be... It's really hard to do at a distance.
All right. I think we actually got it the second time through.
I feel really proud of my work.
I mean, you helped us. You got us with the snaps. Thank you.
Snaps, because you know what? People of color have been helping white people forever by just throwing in the snap. Right? Mm-hmm. And I work with black people. You work with white people. I don't know. Maybe there's something there. All right.
There's something there. Valor Margolis.
Valor Margolis, Dracarys, and Pace.
Good night.